everyone. As Ruth was saying, unfortunately, I don't speak very much Spanish, so I'm going to speak to you in English. So my name is John Shaw. I am based in the UK, just outside Oxford, which is the headquarters of Sophos. I've been at Sophos 13 years now, so I've seen a lot of changes in the security industry in that time. I've got to say that that change is the fastest it's ever been right now, but also I think some of the innovation that's coming out of Sophos is also the most exciting that I've seen in my 13 years, and I'm very pleased to be talking to all of you about that today. So there have been a lot of articles in the news about breaches, about data being stolen or lost by big companies. Lots of very well-known companies in Spain, in the UK, in the US, that are losing huge amounts of their customers' data, more and more because of hackers getting into those companies, stealing the data, making money. And it's tempting to think when you see these articles about very big companies being breached that this is a problem just for large enterprises, very large businesses, and it certainly is a problem for those very large enterprises. Unfortunately, although they don't always get in the news, these breaches, these hacking attacks are happening to businesses and organizations of all sizes all the time. And why is this? Is this because there are suddenly hundreds of thousands of very sophisticated hackers out there targeting every small business? Well, no, it's not because suddenly there's been an explosion of sophisticated hackers. Instead, what's happened is that there's been a development of an infrastructure that lets regular people with limited IT skills, act like they're a sophisticated hacker. So this screenshot that I'm showing is one example of what we call exploit kits. This particular one is a tool called Black Hole. We use it because this one was actually brought down by law enforcement a bit over a year ago. And so we were able to find out a bit about it. I also like it because it has a very nice graphical user interface that makes it easy to see what it does. Unfortunately, although Black Hole doesn't exist anymore, there are many other tools that have taken its place. I don't know how well you can see the screenshot, but what this tool is a software as a service. So hacking has gone to the cloud. In fact, the hackers were some of the earliest to the cloud. It's a full software as a service. It has a software as a service business model. So you can actually sign up to be a hacker for a day for about 100 euros. If you want to commit to a month's worth of hacking, you get a much better rate. I'm not encouraging any of you to do that. Please don't do this. But it really is, it's a platform, if you like. And it means that anyone can sign in. It takes you all the way through from infecting your first website to infecting the computers that visit that website to deciding what you're going to do with those computers. One thing I will draw your attention to, you can see in this nice dashboard, as well as telling the hacker some handy things like which countries are proving most successful to hack and which operating systems and so on, you can see there it talks about exploits. And it's listing the exploits that have been most successful. And what these tools do is, as new exploits against legitimate software are found, they just add them into the tool, and it's there the next day for every hacker to use. So at the time when this screenshot was taken, this particular hacker was doing very well with a Java exploit, a vulnerability in Java. You can see that PDF, which is Acrobat vulnerability, was also doing very well. So what they were doing was getting into computers by hacking, exploiting legitimate software. So their first step was not to put a bad executable on. Their first step was to have a bad website, a bad PDF, etc., that was going to compromise a good piece of software, exploit some good software and get it to do bad things. Now, probably the biggest bad thing, the most visible bad thing that the hackers are doing once they've exploited these computers is ransomware. And I'm sure you've all heard about ransomware. Unfortunately, I expect that many of you might work in organizations where you've even seen ransomware run. And what ransomware does is it uses a security technology. It uses encryption, typically, to encrypt every business file it can find, every document, PDF, PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet, and so on, movie file, encrypt it and make it unreadable because they don't leave the key behind. And then they pop up this. In this case, it uses this particular attack, Locky, uses the background of the computer, so it changes your background to tell you that you've been hacked and that unless you pay money, you will not get your data back. And that's pretty much true. Unless you've actually taken a backup of that data on a computer that hasn't been hacked, the only way you're going to get your data back typically is to pay the money and get the key. Or you could get a supercomputer and wait for about 100 years. But typically, you're going to need to pay the money. And the FBI recently estimated that these hackers are making over $1 billion out of ransomware. And I think that's a big underestimate. I think the number is even bigger than that. It's a huge explosion. So this is a big, big challenge, and it's something that's very visible to people. I think for some time now we've known, well, it's always been the case, that traditional antivirus endpoint software doesn't stop everything. Firewalls don't stop everything. Unfortunately, what ransomware means is when the baddies get through, it's very, very visible now and very expensive and painful for people. And so it's really brought our attention to what can we do about this. And so we have done something about this. You'll see on your badges and on the posters around. We launched recently Sophos Intercept X. And this is a next-generation endpoint protection product. It's something that you can add on to your current endpoint or antivirus software that's going to help you solve 3 problems. So first of all, it's going to solve that problem of legitimate software being exploited. It has anti-exploit technology. Second, it's going to give you visibility. Actually, one of the biggest challenges we find is that companies don't know when they have been hacked how that hack got in. What can they do to stop it happening again? So we've got some technology that lets you find out about that. And finally, protection against particularly ransomware. So anti-exploit, it doesn't use signatures. It's signatureless technology that actually stops the exploits themselves. Root cause analysis, that's what gives you the visibility of what happened, what was the original cause of the problem, and then anti-ransomware technology. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about each of these. I think I'll start with the anti-ransomware, because that's probably the one that is the biggest headache for most people right now, ransomware. So what is this anti-ransomware technology that we've put into Sophos Intercept X? Well, really, what the technology does is it's like a backstop. If everything else has failed, if your firewall has let someone in, if your endpoint software hasn't managed to block the hacked website, hasn't managed to stop the executable from running, this is where anti-ransomware kicks in. Once bad software is actually running on the computer, and what our technology does, is it monitors processes that are accessing the file system. And if it sees that something is changing files, changing multiple files, then it's going to stop it. In the background, it's also keeping copies of files that are being changed. So when it sees that an attack is happening, it sees a process changing files in rapid succession. There's no, this is no longer a user creating lots of PowerPoints and editing them furiously and changing them again. This is clearly something more dramatic than that. If it sees that, the process that's doing it has its access to the file system taken away. And usually this is in 3 or 4 steps. So usually once we've seen 3 or 4 files changed, we can stop it doing any more damage. The great thing, because we were copying the files before, we can actually put the original files back as well. And finally, we can actually as well as preventing that process cause any more damage, we can tell you what happened. How did it get in? So that's the anti-ransomware technology. It's proven very, very effective. We launched the product in September. It's actually built on technology from a company called Surfright that we acquired. So it's been in the field probably a year and a half now, and it's proven very, very effective against every in-the-wild ransomware attack that we've seen. So if we don't stop it before, we stop it with this. So I talked about the root cause analysis. So if that ransomware attack, for example, gets in, how do you work out what happened? How do you work out what you can do to stop it happening again? Or if, for example, you see another type of malware running on the system, something that's exfiltrating files, for example, how can you work out if that actually did damage, if you need to go and report a breach to your boss, or if everything is okay? So far, with traditional antivirus or endpoint products, it's impossible. You see an event saying, we detected something. You don't know, did it run? Did it do damage? Did it touch files that matter or only files that don't? You don't know. So root cause analysis is about helping give you that visibility, helping you see what happened, helping you see what was at risk, and what can you do to stop it happening in future. It looks like this. I don't know if we can make the screen bigger. There we go. So this is a screenshot of Sophos Central, which is where the management tool for InterceptX. So this is the management tool. And what you'll see, it's a little hard to read, so I'm going to zoom in on it. What you see is literally what happened. So we detected an event, a piece of malware. Where did it happen? Which computer? When did it happen? And you'll notice it says when the initial infection happened, and then when we detected it, when we stopped it going any further. And then finally, how did it get in? In this case, it was an attack, an exploit of the Chrome web browser, so that we worked out that was what originally happened. So it gives you that nice, simple summary, but there's a lot of clever stuff underneath, and if you want to get geeky, you can dig in and see the real detail of what happened. And we'll give you, this is actually a simple one. They can get much more complicated than this. It has a visual representation of what happened. So you can see, again, I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that a bit better. So you can see the green P is a process. So that would, in that previous example, it would have been Chrome. That might have generated another process. It might have written some files. It might have read some files, and so on and so on. And you can actually drill in. It's like a graph that you can click in, and you can see exactly what was touched, what process touched it, and so on. So if you want to get into a detailed investigation, you can do it. And crucially, it will highlight for you things like were there business files involved. So we talked about anti-ransomware. We talked about root cause analysis. The third big sort of feature of InterceptX is anti-exploit. So I showed you that example of the black hole exploit kit and how it was exploits against good software that was the main way that hacker was getting in. Well, an analogy I like to use for exploits is bank robbery. Okay, so if you can think about, think about your IT system, your computers, your network as being a bit like a bank, and you've got hackers trying to get in. It's a bit like bank robbers trying to get in. Okay, and if you think about the case of bank robberies, there are every year thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of bank robberies that happen around the world. But if you look at them and look for images of bank robberies happening, like I did a little while back, you'll find that there's only a small number of techniques that the bank robbers use. So, for example, endless bank robberies involve a mask and a weapon. Lots of different masks, lots of different weapons, but always pretty much the same technique. So that's a real one in progress caught by security cameras. So if you look for people with masks and weapons, you're going to stop that technique. Even if you don't know the individual mask and the individual weapon, it doesn't matter. Another technique, drive your vehicle through the front. It's not clever, but it works. So in this case, it was a bank in the north of England, and it was a Land Rover. But it works with any vehicle, any glass-fronted bank. The technique is pretty effective. My favorite one is the top right. So this was a bank in London, in Hatton Garden. Anyone hear of the Hatton Garden bank robbery? It was a very big news in the UK. It was a massive, massive robbery, millions and millions of pounds that they stole. And the robbers actually, they tunneled, so that's another one, tunnel, make a hole. It's as old as the hills. You can read the first Sherlock Holmes story involves exactly this, tunneling through the wall of the basement into the vault, and they stole all the, in this case, safety deposit boxes. As you can see, it was a very thick wall. The people who designed the bank said no one will ever drill through that, but they did. The other fantastic thing about the Hatton Garden bank robbery, by the way, is that the average age of the bank robbers was 69. And the only reason it was under 70 was because one of the bank robbers involved his 50-year-old son. The others were actually all over 70. So incredible. They all got caught. But they were rich for a while. And then, of course, another one, actually. It turns out that it's very hard to get an actual image of someone cracking a safe. So I'm afraid that's a faked one. I couldn't find an actual CCTV image of someone cracking a safe, but of course that's another famous bank robbing technique. So why am I talking about bank robberies? Because when the guys at Surfright who first developed this technology that's now part of Sophos Intercept X, when they first started looking into this problem of how do we stop people exploiting legitimate software, they found that there are only around 20 techniques that are ever used to exploit legitimate software. So every year there are thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities reported in Apple software. Yes, Apple has more vulnerabilities than anyone else. In Microsoft software, in Google software, and so on. Thousands and thousands of weaknesses, problems in that software that a baddie can exploit. But if you look at the technique, only about 20. You get it to write to a piece of memory that it shouldn't, and then you run some code from there, and so on and so on. Okay? Only about 20 techniques. So if we can stop those techniques, it doesn't matter if a new vulnerability comes out. It doesn't matter if if a hacker exploits a new vulnerability in a new piece of software, a 0-day as they call it. Doesn't matter. It's going to be one of those techniques, and we'll stop it. And why is this so important? Why are these 0-day vulnerabilities so important? Well, because 80% or so of those breaches, those big public breaches, and all the ones that are happening to everyone else, start with an exploit. So it's the first step in that chain the hacker uses. It's not the malware yet, but it's a hack, and we can stop. If we stop it there, we stop 80%. The other is, on average, it's 193 days that it takes companies, software companies typically, to fix a vulnerability after they're discovered. So that's 193 days in which that exploit kit can hack everyone. What's even worse, of course, is that we know that in the real world, users, server administrators don't patch, or they take a long time to patch. Patching's a pain. People don't do it. So even if there's a patch, it doesn't get out onto the computers. That's why these exploits are so successful. So what we do with Intercept X is we prevent those techniques. Very simple. We sit in between the operating system and any software that's running, the software that gets targeted, browsers and so on, and we monitor for those techniques, and if we see it happening, we kill the process. No further damage can be done. So, all of that is Sophos Intercept X, and I'm sure many of you are thinking, how can I get hold of this thing? I want to stop ransomware. I want to stop exploits. I want to be able to investigate what's happened when I detect something on a computer. And the good news is there's two ways that you can get it. One is if you're using Sophos Central Endpoint, protection, then you can just add Intercept X. It actually just deploys as part of the same agent. It uses the same management console. But also, if you're not using Sophos, if you're using someone else's antivirus or endpoint software, I'm sorry about that, but it does happen. If you are using Symantec or McAfee or whoever, you can still install Sophos Intercept X alongside. It's designed to work alongside third-party antivirus software. So I've talked quite a lot about Intercept X, and we'll hear some more about it later. We'll see it in action. But I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the other great things we're doing. Before we leave the topic of anti-ransomware and anti-exploit, one question that I do quite often get is, what if I'm a Sophos customer? I know there's quite a few Sophos customers in the room today. What if I'm a Sophos customer? I'm using Enterprise Console. I'm not using Sophos Central yet. Can I still get some of this great new tech? And the answer is soon. Soon you will be able to. You can get it today if you move to Sophos Central, of course. But if you want to carry on using Enterprise Console, we are going to put both the anti-exploit and the anti-ransomware into a new version of the endpoint software. We're targeting before the end of next quarter. And that will be in a new version of the Enterprise Console, version 5.5. You will need to buy an add-on license for that new technology, but once you have that license, you can use Enterprise Console. The one thing I'll highlight, though, is that this is not the full Intercept offering. It's just the technology for anti-ransomware, anti-exploit, and crucially, it doesn't include the root cause analysis. So if you want the who, what, where, when, and the beautiful graph of what happened, you need Sophos Central and you need Intercept X. Okay, so that's for all the Sophos customers out there. Sorry for everyone else. I want to talk a little bit more about some other kinds of endpoints because, we focus a lot on Windows laptops and desktops. They're the ones that are most often targeted. We are, by the way, bringing some of this same technology to Macs in the future. But those aren't the only endpoints out there. Probably the most important endpoint computer that runs in any business is the server. And Sophos also has some great protection both for physical servers and for virtual servers. Technology designed to be very high performance, to have light impact on the computer itself, on the guest agent itself. So we have that today. In our roadmap, over the next 3 to 4 months, we will be adding support for Hyper-V. For those of you who are using Hyper-V, not VMware, we'll be adding an agentless scanning technique for Hyper-V, and we'll be adding support also for Amazon Web Services, for people whose servers aren't even in the building anymore and that are running in the cloud. We have some great techniques for helping you do that with, coping with on-demand and so on. So that's coming. Servers are really important. And we will be adding, of course, anti-ransomware protection for servers as well into our Sophos Central server protection. So that's servers. But those are also not the only endpoint computers in our organizations. So how many of you here today have got either a smartphone or a tablet with you? Put your hands up for me if you have a smartphone or a tablet. Okay, I can see about 3 people in the room who sadly don't have a smartphone or a tablet, or maybe they're just too embarrassed. Everyone has them, right? We all have them. And these things that you have in your pocket or in your bag, these are computers. Okay, these are full computers. I mean, think about what is there that you can do on your Windows laptop that you can't do on your smartphone or your tablet today? Have a think. If I'd asked you that 5 years ago, you'd have said, oh, I can't edit Word documents or do PowerPoint, and I can't make Skype calls. But you can do all of those things now. You can do GoToMeeting. You can do pretty much anything you can think of that you can do on a Windows computer, you can do on your iOS or on your Android device. These things are totally, fully capable computers. So why does that matter? Who cares? These things are personal, right? They're not business tools. Why do we need to worry about this? Well, let me ask you another question. I know many of you work in IT teams in different organizations. If you think about whether or not you work in IT, if you think about your organization, can you put your hand up, please, if your organization allows people to work on their personal smartphone or tablet? Hands up if that's something you allow people to do. Okay, so I would say roughly that's about 20%. So this audience reflects roughly the global average. When we ask people around the world that question, about 20% of organizations say, yep, we let people work on smartphones or tablets. That's these little green bars there, okay? 26% on smartphones, and so on. Now, when we ask the same question to users, end users, do you do work on your smartphone or your tablet? 2/3 of them say yes. All right? So there is a big disconnect between what IT thinks is happening and what's actually happening. So whether you like it or not, your employees are using those full computing devices to work. And guess what? Those full computing devices are full of your data. They are full of Word files and PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and so on that really are the company's property. They're on those devices. And this is a real big challenge for organizations, and one that I think everyone kind of knows is true. I didn't see anyone looking very shocked by the 2/3, right? You kind of know it's true, but everyone's sort of hoping it will go away and isn't true. It is true, unfortunately, and we need to start dealing with it. So there is a space that Gartner calls enterprise mobility management. They used to call it mobile device management, MDM. Now they call it EMM. We have a product called Sophos Mobile Control that's in that space. And it does, these are the 4 things they talk about: device management, application management, email management, content management. Those are the things you need to be doing. And guess what? Tick, 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 tick. Our product does all of those. The reason, though, that we think we're a bit different and that we're doing something different in protecting these mobile devices is that we are, if you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, we're the only security company that's doing this. The others are really all management companies. And we're different because we're a security company. Why? Why does that matter? Why is that relevant for controlling these mobile devices? Well, because actually when you really think about what matters to you about your employees using these devices, it comes to the same thing as on your main computers. It's about protecting the company's data. Whether it's from hackers or from accidental loss or from the employee themselves, you need to protect that data. And we think that's really fundamentally a security challenge. So for example, one of the things you can do with our product is also manage our security, our threat protection technology on Androids. And why does that matter? Because on Androids, we see, our labs see around 100,000 new threats every month on Android. Android is massively susceptible to malware. Every bad thing you can think of, fake antivirus, ransomware, all these things, they exist on Android too. Android has been hugely successful. It's the winning mobile platform in terms of adoption. Lots of you have probably got Androids with you. And the reason it's been so successful is it's very open to develop on, but it's also very easy to write malware for. So you have to stop malware and protect against these modern threats, including ransomware, on your Androids as well. And that's just built in for us. That's part of what we do. In fact, to boast a little bit, our Android security has been the top of the independent tester, AV test for about 1.5 years now, the only one to just get 100% every single time. So we have provably the best, and it's just integrated with our management. The other reason is data. So the other big thing that you need to be concerned about is your employees using these probably personal devices to do all their own personal stuff, but also have your company data on. And something that companies are increasingly concerned about is how can I keep that separate? And crucially, when the employee leaves, how can I get the data back without wiping the whole device? Because no one's going to let you wipe the whole device. And the answer to that is containers. The answer to that is to have separate apps for content, for email, and so on, that keep your data separate, integrate it with the management. You can just remove it when the employee leaves. That's another big part of what we do, keeping that data separate and crucially keeping it protected when it's on the mobile device. And lots of analysts like what we're doing, and we get lots of good ratings for our product from just about everyone you can think of for this mobile product. So an endpoint is an endpoint, mobiles as well, really, really important. Why, when we think about all this stuff, what are we really caring about? What we're really caring about is data, right? If a laptop gets stolen, or if a hacker gets into a computer, you're not really worried about anything very much than the data itself on that computer. Data is the new gold, to quote a well-known security expert. Data is the new gold. And yet, for most hackers, when they get into your IT network, when they get into one of your computers, it kind of looks like this, right? If you go back to the banking analogy, it looks like, for the hacker, they've walked in, they got through the front door, they picked the lock, they climbed in through the window, they get inside the bank, and the money's just all piled up, ready for them to take. Yeah, that's the experience. Now, of course, that isn't what happens inside a bank. What happens inside a bank is you put the money in a safe. I love this photograph. This photograph was taken by police in the south of Denmark earlier this year. And so some bank robbers had robbed a business. Some robbers had robbed a business. They'd got in. They'd found the safe. They couldn't break into the safe, so they put the safe in the back of their truck, and they tried to break into it outside, and they still couldn't break into it. And they got so angry that in the end they threw the safe into a lake. Okay. Unfortunately, it was the south of Denmark in winter, and the lake was frozen, which is why it's sitting there. But of course, what this shows is what you need to be doing with your data is putting it in a safe. You need to be encrypting your data. That's the way to be sure that if the hackers get past everything else, they've got your files, but they haven't got your data. And the thing that I think most people are aware of when they think about encryption is disk encryption. Okay, so using disk encryption on your Windows laptops, using disk encryption on your Mac computers. Often these days it's the built-in BitLocker or File Vault. So again, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many of you have organizations where you make sure that your Windows computers and your Mac computers have encrypted disks? Hands up if you encrypt your laptops, if you encrypt the disks in your computers. Okay, yeah, that's about probably a third of you, and that's, again, about the global average. So you're a nice representative audience. So for the third of you that put your hands up, well done, congratulations. If someone leaves that laptop in an airport or someone leaves it in the back of a taxi, you don't have a data breach on your hands. You don't have to worry about the 4% of revenue fine from the GDPR. For the two-thirds who didn't put your hands up, you might want to be worrying about that now. 4% of revenue for a laptop in the back of the cab that you can't prove was protected, that you can't prove that it didn't have data that could be taken away. That's a problem. So disk encryption is something that if you're not doing it, you need to do. And the good news is it's much easier to do these days with BitLocker and File Vault, and we've got some nice ways to make that simple to manage. Even for the people who put their hands up, is disk encryption enough? So if a hacker gets into your laptop and it's got BitLocker on it, are you okay? Yeah? No. No. I mean, you're okay if the hacker gets hold of the physical laptop and it's turned off, right? What BitLocker is going to stop, or what disk encryption is going to stop, it's going to stop them taking the disk out and taking data off the disk. But if your laptop is running, if the user is logged in and the hacker gets onto that laptop, disk encryption does you no good. Everything's decrypted. They can steal all your data again. And the only way you're going to stop that is file encryption. You need to encrypt the files on that computer. Okay, and a lot of large businesses for some time now have been encrypting important files, employee data, patents and designs, crucial engineering documents, patient data in hospitals. People have started to encrypt the really important data in files as well. But most organizations haven't done this yet. And the reason they haven't done it is it's scary and it's hard and it sounds like, oh, if the files are encrypted, well, it sounds like ransomware from earlier, right? I mean, isn't it? If it goes wrong, then no one can read the data, and no, people in IT are not rushing to want to do this. So we've got a radical thought for how to make this easier, something that we released in our Safeguard Enterprise 8 product earlier this year. And our radical approach is to encrypt everything all the time. And you might think, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would you solve this problem by encrypting even more stuff? Well, it's kind of strangely, when you start thinking about encrypting everything all the time, things actually become easier. It becomes easier to be sure that your data is protected. Because you can now make sure that anyone who's in your organization can read that data. There's one key for your data. You just give it to every employee in your organization as part of deploying the software. So you don't have to worry about who has access to what. It's all encrypted all the time, and as long as they work for you, they can read it. And they never know any different. So in fact, this presentation that I'm showing you right now, we use this in Sophos. So this presentation is a PowerPoint file that it's taken different files from different people. It's probably been through 100 different versions as it's gone from one computer to another within the organization, multiple different people working on it. Every single time that file was encrypted. Every iteration of it, whether it was on mine or my colleagues in America or in Spain or in the UK, always encrypted. And the only time I ever have needed to decrypt this is when I want to show it on the laptop belonging to someone who doesn't work for Sophos. And at that point, I right-click and I decrypt. It's super, super simple. And crucially, it's simple to implement. You don't have to now work out which data you want to encrypt. You don't work out who gets the keys. Everyone's encrypted all the time. And the other beautiful thing about it is it only decrypts files for software that should. So PowerPoint gets the key, right? So it can read this encrypted file. But if the hacker puts exfiltrator.exe on my computer, it'll read the file, but we won't decrypt it for them. So they'll just exfiltrate a bunch of encrypted files. So it protects your data from the hacker when they're on the system. It's really exciting stuff. It's very cutting edge. We're seeing more and more companies adopt it now that we've released this. And I thoroughly encourage you to take a look at this and think about the ultimate protection for your data. I mentioned a couple of times Sophos Central. This is my last sort of wrapping up. Sophos Central is our management console. Vicente mentioned it earlier on. It manages not just the InterceptX and our endpoint protection. It manages our mobile technology that I talked about. It manages encryption. It manages our server protection. And we're actually putting things like web and email in there as well. So it becomes one place where you can manage every security technology that you take from Sophos. It's really, really powerful. And of course, it's the place that we can then bring synchronized security together. So again, I encourage you to take also a look at Sophos Central and all the things it can do. So that's a rapid run through the world of endpoint protection. The big headline for us, of course, is InterceptX, stopping ransomware, stopping exploits, and giving you great root cause analysis of what happened. So InterceptX, really, really exciting. It's been already an incredibly successful product for us. If you haven't looked at it, I encourage you to do so. But also remember, you have other endpoints to worry about too, mobiles and servers, and crucially, the most important thing, protect the data that's on them. So enjoy the rest of the day. I will be around for the rest of the day and happy to answer any questions. Only in English, I'm afraid, sorry. But I look forward to talking to some of you, and thank you very much.